Also, when you're raising, this is another thing that no one talks about that killed me, like physically.
Steph, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks, Maddie.
I'm so excited to be chatting. I love your product. I use it all the time. I keep one in my purse with me, like literally in my, I feel like every girl has like a little pouch that they have like all of their stuff in. It's like lip gloss, concealer, like deodorant, something like that. And like yours has now been an addition to my Everywhere Everything pouch. So I want to talk about how you started your entrepreneur journey, what that has been like, what the evolution has been, how you got to Stimmie, all that kind of good stuff. So why don't you start at the beginning? Like, How did you always want to be an entrepreneur? What was that experience like?
Oh my gosh. So, first, I'm excited that it's part of your kit because this is like the common theme and what I'm hearing from everyone, whether it's a pouch in a female's, purse or like the bedside table, or as a lot of guys are saying, they're like keeping it on the coffee table while they're watching the game, just sitting and watching TV. So everyone kind of has their own, curation model, if you will.
Yeah.
But I grew up with my dad being an entrepreneur. So I always kind of knew it was ingrained in me. Like I only knew how to work from like a very young age, and just seeing, I also knew autonomy and like what it's like to own your own business, etc. So when I was in school navigating like things that I liked, I was always very creatively charged. I loved fashion. I loved, art, photography, like things that I was great at. But then there was the piece of, you need to graduate, you need to make money, you need to have a job. So the other side of my brain was I actually loved biology and I was pretty good at science.
Okay.
And I also loved always going to the dentist. So, when you're like, 16, 17, you have to decide what you want to do for the rest of your life.
Which is crazy.
Wild thinking about it. Like, I have a daughter who's 6 and I'm like, there's no way in 10 years, like we need to make this decision. But that's how it was back then.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, good at science, good with my hands, very meticulous, like great dexterity, love the dentist. I've never seen a dentist, actually. I've only ever seen a hygienist. Liked what she did, went for my co-op, and like I used to volunteer at dental offices just to like watch the hygienist and shadow her. And I kind of set my mind to it probably age 16. There's people that I'm friends with today that I met when I was 16, and they remember like being on a bus with me at summer camp or something. And they're like, well, I remember when you were 16 and you said you were going to be a dental hygienist. So anyways, did that. Okay. And I always tried to like weave my passions and interests into my job in some capacity, whether it be my patients like to see me because I would give them great restaurant recommendations, or we would talk about fitness or health and wellness. So there was always this allure to like get in the health and wellness space. Never in a million years would I ever think to innovate a product. And they always say like the best ideas happen by accident. So throughout my hygiene career, I kind of dabbled into different entrepreneurial endeavors. Like when I was really into like health and wellness, I created like this muffin company, like very small scale, like more like hobbies. Just for friends and family. Then I got my fitness license in spin and in bar. And it was like a great experience for me to create my own community, my own following, my own classes where I could weave in like my own personal brand and like music taste and etc. And that actually went really well too, but it still wasn't a business. And what kind of happened with Stimmie was I had an idea and it was so parked like back row in my brain, but I knew it was a message that like it's time to make a change and it's time to dabble into something new. And we had our daughter 2018 and I was on mat leave and I was like, okay, this is the time. Like I'm going to figure out what I want to do. And at the time I had just visited New York City, and it was like the first infrared sauna experience that came to like North America. Like there was a couple in Australia at the time, but this was the first in North America, and it was in New York. And I was like, oh my gosh, I need to get this quick before it catches on. I want to bring this to Toronto. So I spent my entire mat leave, 18 months, learning how to build out a business plan, learning like what are advisors, like are they're just like a fancy word for mentor. How are they going to help me? What do I do? Like what's the next step? And I took it so far that like I was looking at locations. I was speaking, people were DMing me on Instagram being like, when do you open? When does your website launch? I want to see your schedule. Cause I truly thought I was going to open this Infrared Sauna experience. And it's so funny because in Toronto, there's one that just opened a couple years ago. And it just so happened to be the same street that I actually went and looked at a space, like one block down. So my husband's like, okay, clearly like you have the right mind frame to like see an opportunity, know who your market is, like know the next steps, but like they were just so far ahead of me behind the scenes that I had no idea. So that kind of gave me the building blocks of like what it takes just to have an idea. Because the idea is one thing, execution is another. Like, do you have the grit to see this through for the next, 5, 10, 15 years? But also, you need to plan what that next, 5, 10 years are going to look like to say, like, is this even going to work? Like, what's the point of like trying it out if you haven't gone through scenario planning, 1,000 times to make sure that it's going to work? So I went and did, when I had this idea, like I said, parked in the back of my brain, done mat leave. I didn't go back into dental hygiene. I was like, you know what? Something is telling me that I have, a next chapter and it's going to be something entrepreneurial, but I still didn't know what it was going to be. So I went and actually got a management job within retail, which is like so far different than dentistry. So I did that for 2 years and I did everything from like sales management, people management, like on the floor in the stores. And then also when COVID hit, we took it to e-com. So just being able to see how like back end of product focused businesses run and operate and all the cross functionals you deal with, and like getting a glimpse of supply chain and infrastructure and, P&Ls and like really dialing in on numbers day to day. It was like such a different way to look at the experience when you just like go into a store and like buy a new t-shirt or whatever. So that really gave me the tools I needed. And in that moment, I knew I was going to do something. And my experience as a hygienist has always been, never lecturing people, you need to floss more. You need to floss more. Why aren't you flossing? Because that's all we hear when we go to the dentist. It's like, true. We're told that and we're asked that, but like, why are we told that? Why are we asked that? And if that message isn't resonating with people, what will? So I used to just, in the 13 first years of me being just a hygienist, nothing else, I used to go around people's mouths with a rubber tip stimulator, that like gold long metal sticky thing with the pick. And I used to just talk to them. And then as I was talking to them, I would show them all the gunk and plaque that was coming off your teeth. And they would all go, "Ooh, this is so gross." And then they would say, "Why has no one ever showed me this thing before?" And because it's like from 1980s and we think of like our grandparents when we think of rubber tip stimulators. But the overall consensus was it's easy to use, easy to clean, and painless. And people tend to like it. But it wasn't very convenient because it's like this long metal thing that like just sits beside your toothbrush. Or people would say to me, "I have this thing. I never knew what to do. No one's ever shown me. It's been in a drawer for the last 2 years." And I heard that without exaggeration, 30,000 times plus. Just not, it was like I was working 6 days a week times 13 years times 8 to 10 patients a day. Like it was a lot. And when I was in retail and I was just seeing like product evolution, I'm like, there has to be a way to make the rubber tip cool and to make it like sexy. Yeah. To get something people want to use and not want to hide away in a drawer. And that was the first pillar to Stimmie. And it was only bad feedback, like negative. Like no one knows what a gum stimulator does, Steph. Like you're telling me people have it now. They don't use it. Why are you reinventing it? People don't know what it is. They don't know the benefit. You have so much educating to do. And I was like, whatever. Something
like that to me is why it's such a good opportunity. Like when you say that it's something that everybody has but doesn't know how to use, it's like, well, that's so easy because then it's just educate. Like to me, like that demonstrates that it was such a prime opportunity for disruption. And I think like in general, there are so many industries where we felt like good has just been good enough.
Yeah.
And it's like not a lot of innovation has taken place within those industries for a long time. And to me, like that demonstrates that it's prime for disruption.
Totally. And I actually thought the way that you did at first, but then of course, like with any new product, you want to get feedback and you want to talk to people about it. I would just get like eyeballs going in opposite directions. Like, what? Like, I don't get it. It's a gum stimulator. Like, I don't get it. And I would talk about it so much. And the thing that was my light bulb moment that completely shifted not the product and the idea that I had in my mind. And it was this, but it was a lot longer, like the gold medal one. It was just, it looked prettier.
Yeah.
But it was that when I would talk to people, immediately they would do this. Or they're like, oh my God, you're a hygienist. Don't look at my teeth. Or, oh my God, I can't believe we're talking about this right now. I just ate. And it was when I saw that I was like, oh my gosh, the problem isn't that, yes, people hate flossing. Yes, they don't like to get lectured when they go to the dentist. Yes, there's this tool that doesn't replace flossing, but I'd rather you do something effective than do nothing at all. And there is that solution out there, whether it's a water pick that lives on your counter, whether it's, you know, those disposable floss picks. There's so many things that for the right person, they can work well. Sure, that's like the dental side. But when I went out to the streets outside the dental people and having these conversations and everyone's going, oh my God, I'm so self-conscious. It's like, we need to reinvent the toothpick, not another fancy, complicated, you know, dental product. And then when I had that conversation, it was like at weddings, oh my God, I have kale in my teeth. I can't believe we're like, do you have one on you? Do you have a sample? Like I need one right now. And it's just so funny because like we all know what a toothpick is. And I'll never forget the founder and I just slid into her DMs and we had a call. And she's just like, you need to dumb it down for people. Like what is it? Like, what is the thing? And I couldn't even explain it. And it took me about 18 months of talking about it where I'm like, oh my God, duh, it's just a toothpick. Like I dumbed it down. It took me 18 months and it's something so simple.
I think this is such like a fascinating and important moment that I haven't even thought about myself. As you know, like, I'm a co-founder of a tech platform. And I think the hardest thing really is this work of like, how do you distill it down to its barest form? Like what at the core is it? What is it doing? And to take it, because I think we think from such a high level, like for you as a hygienist, you're like, it's a gum stimulator. It's doing all these things. Like here are the benefits, the value propositions. But when you go to market it to somebody and you go to talk to somebody about it, it's like, it doesn't matter how well of a journey you take them through A to B to C to be like, here's what it is from your perspective. It really matters about just simply like at the core, what is it? And for you, it was a toothpick, which is like, I don't know why it's so hard to do that. Like why, I don't know, why is it so hard to distill down into the simplest form? Is it just because we're so in the weeds? Like,
and that's what people say.
It's fascinating.
Like, they're like, when you're so attached and you're too close to the business, you don't make the right decisions. You need to be like so far removed. And I would hear people say that to me, but I didn't really get it. Like I'm sure you feel the same way. And like, there's so many things that people would say to me and I'm like, am I dumb? Like, I just don't get it. Like, what am I doing wrong? But it's true. Like when you're so close to it, you want to perfect like every aspect of your delivery and what your messaging is. But that doesn't resonate with people. Like simplicity resonates, like short, sweet, concise. So the name Stimmie, it actually was derived from me personally getting gum surgery. And I've worked in specialty for a periodontist. And all the periodontists I work with, it's like it's like a non-negotiable. If you're a patient there and you're going through therapy or treatment of any kind, like you are using a rubber tip stimulator. And if you're not going to be compliant with it, like we're not treating you. Like they believe in the science. They see the results. I've seen the results of people with like loose implants and like pus coming out. And I put them on a regimen with a rubber tip because it's the only thing they were capable of doing. And it's completely like healed and restored their tissue. So like, I also believe in it from like a dental health perspective. And so when I had my own gum surgery, I couldn't floss for 2 weeks. And you know what, that throbbing, like feeling, like even when you have like a cut on like your skin and it's healing and it's itchy and you're just oh, it's like irritating. I'm like, oh, I just need to stimulate my gums. I need a Stimmie. And I just said it, like, I need a Stimmie, like out of the blue. And my husband, again, being a marketer, he's like, that name is bleeping awful. Like, get rid of it. Like, don't ever use it. And then
what?
And I'm like, I also like don't really like the name. And I had some, I was working with a couple people out in Brooklyn, New York. They were doing a photography for like my preliminary prototypes. And they were Gen Z and like the coolest guys I've ever met. They have the most impeccable taste. Like, I would trust them with anything when it came to aesthetic. And just, they were amazing. And they're like, we love the name. But anytime I spoke to anyone of a different demographic, they're like, I hate the name. I love everything about it, but change the name. And we went back and forth. And then, of course, like trademark and legal fees were insane because every time you want to search for a new name, you have to pay, let alone file, all that stuff. And I'm like, I just can't do it. I can't keep like filing and searching and thinking about new names. And then there's the layer, and a lot of people that start a business and think of a name they don't think about is your branding. When something's like, I didn't think of my packaging in my box until like the very last step.
Right.
Like, think of your name. If this was like super, super long, I wouldn't be able to like brand it a certain way. Or if it was only 3 letters or 4 letters, or like if it was 4 letters, I could probably brand it like a block, like 2 letters on top, 2 letters on bottom. There's so many creative things you can do. But once you have your name, you can't change it. Like your logo and all that stuff is not compromised, but like you're kind of stuck. So I'm glad I kept it. I like it. It's easy, but it was a complete, again, accident.
What has so once you had the idea and you got into production, what has the process been like for you so far? Like, how has go-to-market been? Do you need funding? Like, what has that experience been like?
So production was so far later down the road. Like, I only started production. It will be almost 1 year. So like September 19th of last year, we did a Kickstarter. So that Kickstarter was more to get product market fit and to get funding for production. That funding, we exceeded our goal within 13 hours of our Kickstarter, and it was all organic. We like shot right to the top. I had my own theory on like how to get visibility, but I didn't speak to anyone who's done a Kickstarter. It was all in my head. I just thought of like the same way that like Instagram and other things blow up, like do things at the same time. You get all these people together and everyone does it at once. And I didn't know this would happen. I had people just DMing me throughout the day, like, you're making your way up to the Explore. You're on the Explore page. Oh my God, you're number 1 in Canada. You're number 55 worldwide. And then what happened was I ended up in a newsletter. So my like project got in front of like the millions of people that have the Kickstarter email and app on their phone. So I had a lot of organic worldwide purchases, but it's also like a really low price point item. So it's not like I was doing like hundreds of thousands in sales, but it was enough to prove like this is viable. People are excited. People want this. And it's not just my community. It's complete strangers. And, but it still wasn't enough to get me all the way through production. So that was proof of concept enough to go to investors. I got my first investor check November 2021. It is 2024. Wow. So I know people say, and I was scared to raise because I was scared. I was freaked out by other founders and people that desired to be founders and hung out with a lot of founders. And their advice to me was always fundraising can kill your brand. If you don't raise in 6 weeks, you're done. It's going to ruin your reputation.
Why?
If you start to, I don't know, but knowing what I know now about raising, it is easier, I guess, to raise like in 4 to 6 weeks or 6 to 12 weeks when you're later, when you're doing like 6, 7 figures and you're going, VC money or PE money, and they're already like, they understand your valuation. You have real data points. You have like real numbers and projections, made up projections. But when this is just all in my head and I didn't even have a product, it was really hard for me to pitch investors, say, I have an idea.
Right.
I need my first 20K from you. And I can't tell you what the idea is because I don't have a patent. So if you write me a check for 20K, I'll get the patent. I'll come back and tell you what it is. Then I can start making prototypes. And that was my song and dance for like 2 years. So once I got
that's hard.
It was so hard. And then I got my first patent, and then I couldn't even afford real prototypes. We had to do like 3D printed prototypes, which you can't even use in your mouth because like the plastic is so vile. Like it's like paint and like nail polish acetone smelling.
Oh God.
And so I had to find people with like 3D printers that would do it as a favor. Luckily, a lot of my dentist friends have 3D printers in their office for mouth guards. So we kind of did it that way for the handle. And then the tip, I did it. I paid just like out of pocket, like bootstrapping. And it seems like it's such an inexpensive thing to make and prototype. But when you're paying for engineers and they're tweaking everything, and it's their time. And I did 32 iterations to make it perfect. Like I knew anatomically the form and function, how it needed to be, but someone making it who's an engineer, like they don't understand the anatomy of
like
the
the
mouth
structure
that I do. Like it was so meticulous. And so I did a little bit before I had prototypes, and then, I spoke to
I want to know, what was your pitch like to get people to buy into this thing without having any sort of like you said, there's no data points, there's no product, you can't even talk about what it is. Like, how did you get people to buy into it?
So I had my first investor changed everything for me because he heard that I had this idea. So he was actually my boss for 13 years. He was a dentist.
Okay.
And I told his niece, who I'm friends with, about my idea and what I wanted to do. And I'm like, please don't tell anyone because I don't even know if I can afford to make this happen. And I don't want anyone to steal the idea. And I don't want to be embarrassed and all the things that like imposter syndrome people go through. And sure enough, she told her uncle, who was my boss. And we were out for dinner, and he goes, Adina told me what you're doing, and I'm not going to bug you about it. I'm not going to ask you questions. But what I will say is when you are ready to start raising, I'm a hygienist. Like I don't have like hundreds of thousands, $500,000 to like bring that to market. He's like, I want you to come to me first. And I couldn't even afford like a lawyer to like do a term sheet. Like it was just so scrappy. Took me so much time. So I went to him. He wrote me my first check. And so I didn't really have a pitch to him. It was more that he believed in me. And they always say, like, I'm sure you've heard this a million times, like when people are investing for concept and like lack of proof of concept, even that, they're investing in the founder and in the person. And like, he knows I'm the hardest working person in the room. Like he knows I won't give up. It's not going to be like here today, gone tomorrow. So I didn't really have to pitch him. After that, I just started reaching out to people, like not to pitch, but just to tell people what I was doing. So I reached out to him, got my first, I think it was 18,000, contacted a patent lawyer, who has this firm has like literally been my dream. I've had the worst experience with lawyers, but my patent firm is just like my family at this point. And so they walked me through everything, completely held my hand. And I just started reaching out to people like, hey, you've built a brand. I would love to share with you my idea and what I want to do. And it was more just like me getting curious. Like, I want to know about your experience. I want to know what I can extract from you. And the end of the conversation always led to, you know, do you have anyone in mind that you think I should connect with and talk to? And the first person I talked to after that initial conversation was someone in tech, but he's a tech builder for dental offices. He's in New York, and we're still in contact on LinkedIn. And so he spoke with me, and then he gave me names of people to reach out to. And I always ask for at least 3 names, because 2 out of the 3, if not 3 out of the 3, are just not going to respond to you. Like, people are busy. Like, I'm sure you feel the same way. I try to always respond to people, even if I know it's not worth my time. Like, but not everyone operates that way. And it's not always, sometimes it's intentional, sometimes not intentional. But like, I would always ask for 3 names. And so I would say like the first 3, and I know this for a fact, the first 300 conversations that I had weren't really pitches. It was just storytelling. I just want to tell you about me.
300?
Yeah. And the reason it was 300 was my friend's wedding, which was actually 2 years ago today, September 3rd. Yeah, 2 years ago today. We went to their wedding in Italy, and it was like all these New Yorkers, and they're all like business savvy and creative and like fabulous, like obsessed with stuff like this. I was talking to them about it, and one of them, I'm pretty sure they said he was a shareholder for Invisalign. He said to me, once you've spoken to 300 people, feel free to reach out to me, and then we can have a conversation. So
300.
Yeah.
Holy
and that's
crap.
like, that's
that
like
is so many.
No, but now when I think back to my journey, that's like nothing. But I made a list. I kept
Were you just spending like half of your day literally just talking to people about the product, about their experiences, like trying to genuinely just like absorb as much as you humanly could?
Yeah, every conversation was so different. It was more like I just booked 20 minutes. And if it was like some days I'd have like 5 calls in one day, some days it would be like beginning of day or end of day. I would just try to stack as much as possible. And it was just a lot of cold reaching on LinkedIn, on Instagram, and then asking for those connections. And it wasn't like pitching, but it was at the end, you know, I need to raise money. I know what my next steps are. And it was great because you have a lot of people telling you what you need to do like a year from now or step 19, 20, 21. But as a founder, you need to know what like your step like A to B is and just stop there. But it's great because
truly.
Yeah, because like you don't care what's going to happen. Like someone was telling me, well, you're going to need 2 factories at one point. One's not going to be enough. I'm like, let me just get the prototype before we figure out the factory.
Well, that's the hard part, right? Is like you're talking to people and it's great to have all of this stuff. So like when you do get to that point, you already know what to do, but you cannot get there if you cannot take the next step, which I feel like I'm really glad that we're talking about this because I don't think enough people actually talk about this where you're like, I basically didn't have like a full-blown product yet that you were like really putting out to market. And I've always been trying to understand what that time looked like as a founder. I'm like, do you spend that like working on your social media presence? Do you spend that trying to find investors? Like, how do you spend that time? And really it's about connecting with other people to just talk. Like, eventually, maybe you're pitching your product because probably by that point you've gotten so good at talking about it that you've like refined it down to the point where it's very clearly understandable and like you're communicating the value of it well. But before that, it's really just like about how can you learn as much as you possibly can about this process, this experience, and then also how can you communicate your product?
Yeah. And I wouldn't change anything. Like when I look back and zoom out, like so much time was spent just talking to people and like, yes, got some golden nuggets. Yes, some of them were just like could have done without, but you don't know unless you go for it. And the most interesting thing is this was again 2 years ago when I was given that 300 target goal, and I stuck to it. And I was reaching out to people on LinkedIn, and my strategy was, okay, like who are the VC funds that invest in oral care? I don't want VC, but I want to know who sits on their boards, and who people that sit on their boards, what are other endeavors that they like, what does their history look like? And who are their advisors and who are their mentors? And I would kind of weed it down. So I wasn't so close to the VCs, but close enough that they knew my industry and knew what I was trying to build. So that was my strategy. And there was one person in particular.
Genius.
Yeah, I don't know how it came. I think because a VC did approach me in dental, and it gave me like a scary feeling because they wouldn't sign NDAs and I was way too early to be talking to them. But I think they were just trying to build up their dental portfolio. So I was like, ooh, I want to know who sits on their board.
But I feel like also, yeah, I was going to say, I feel like it's also almost like a smarter way to go about VC funding, because you're not going direct to the fund and being like, oh, like, please, please, please give us money. You're more like going to their mentors and their advisors and being like, hey, I had this idea, because then if they're on board, they're going to go, it's going to trickle down to the VC and they're going to be like, oh, you need to be investing in this. Like, I feel like that's such a genius strategy.
So, yeah, I mean, thank you. And my strategy wasn't even to get to VC, because I don't want that at all this stage. It was more so just to talk to sophisticated. I wanted to get to sophisticated investors. So people that do this for a living. And I guess like the storyline to all of this, it's just relationships. There's people that I spoke to in that list of 100 that I'll never speak to again. There's people that, female founder, they're talking to you for the wrong reasons. And as soon as you don't show any interest in them on a personal level, you never hear from them again. Yeah. And then there's the people that are true, like business acumen, like love seeing other people succeed, or not everyone's a philanthropist and just wants to like help, but there's always mutual benefit to collaborate where both parties can get something out of it. And ultimately, like, it's so much easier to sell your idea and for that party to get something in return from you when there's already that relationship. And that's kind of what came out of all my pitching. But then fast forward, so I think I only raised on my own, I got to 100K. I guess it's called family and friends. Meanwhile, they weren't family or friends, but like just people that I've like met along the way. A couple friends, 2 friends. But once I got to the 100K, I did the Kickstarter, and I didn't even have enough money to make my video for the Kickstarter. So I went back to my first investor, and I was just like, I need 6K to make a video for a Kickstarter. And if I do this Kickstarter, I promise you it's going to go well. And if it goes well, I'm going to get this in market. And if once I get it in market, like now we have opportunity to actually like become something. But none of that can happen if I can't make this video. So I need the money and I need it right now. And I was relentless, and I wouldn't leave his office until he wrote me the check. So he wrote me the check for 6K, and I was already prepared that I already had the updated Safe Note, like fundraising documents with his updated amount that he's
nice.
In the business, like ready to go. I was like, I knew I was going to get it. I manifested it.
Yeah.
And we just did an exchange.
You were like, I am fully prepared to stand off here. I will not leave.
And not for a penny less. So I did that. We did our Kickstarter. And then on the last day, or second last day, I remember exactly where I was sitting. I was at my sister-in-law's on my computer doing work. And I get a DM from someone, and it was a picture of my Kickstarter on the Explore page next to an old friend I haven't spoken to in 20 years with his Kickstarter right beside me. And he's like, we're head to head. I'm going to beat you out of first place. And then he's just like, I love that you're building this. I'm obsessed with your product. Like, can we get together and meet? I want to learn more. And I'm just like, okay, it's like not creepy. Like I knew him from 20 years ago. Like we have enough mutual friends. Like I love connecting. Like, sure. And so we met, and it was perfect timing because I was going through stuff with like my cap table, and I was just like, I was making some big decisions, and I kind of like went to him and just vented. And he started to see all the work I've been doing behind the scenes besides just having this. And he's like, I was not expecting this from you. I was not expecting you to have like your whole business from start to finish, like lined up, ready to go. He's like, the fact that you're a first time founder and have the foresight to do this is impressive. And in my head, I'm like, well, it's not my first time because I did it with the infrared sauna experience, but like I had like all my stuff like put together. And he ended up investing. He asked, he goes, as soon as you have a sample, like I want to try it. And he's like, I'm obsessed. And he ended up becoming one of my investors, and he's my most active advisor. He feels like a 50-50 partner.
Wow.
And he actually brought his team that helps his startups over to Stimmie. So people as advisors, and he brought in more investors for me as well. So that was like crazy. And those were easy to close because he was like, listen, guys, like I invested.
Yeah.
I already believe in it. I believe in her. It ended up being for both of these like new investors that he brought in, it was maybe a 15-minute conversation. And I had the money within like 24, 48 hours. So it was very different than me trying to raise on my own, where it's like 20 plus back and forth conversations and then they say no. So I remember when I was raising, someone told me make a list of all the people you've spoken to that seem interested and then ask them, like, would you be interested? Like, you can't like sugarcoat it and like not say it out loud. You actually have to say, would you be interested in investing? And if they say no, it's like, you end up being so grateful. And I'm like, oh, thank you. Because like the inverse to that is people say yes, or I want more information, or they send you emails with 100 questions and they want you to answer it. And you go back and forth and go back and forth. And then it's a no. And it's the longest road to a no versus like a no on the spot is just a huge relief.
Yeah.
And someone that's a founder here in Toronto said to me, out of all the 20 people that verbally tell you that they're going to write you a check, like 1 in 20 might. And I was like, is that your experience or is that everyone's experience? He's like, yeah, it was my experience. He's like, but it also, I had hundreds of other people tell me it was their experience too. It's just like the name of the game, 1 in 20 people who tell you, not who you think are going to write checks, but who tell you they're going to. Like 9 out of 10 of them actually will never. And it's so crazy. Like, I actually like talking about this, and I've been like waiting in my head, like, do I share this so candidly? Because when I listen to podcasts, the only people that talk about fundraising are those who have either had an exit, on their way to an exit, have a established business, they're on their second or third round, they come from money. So it's very different also to say, oh, I'm raising 500K for my pre-seed startup. We've already raised 300. That first 150, 200 could have come from their family. Nothing wrong with that, but that's usually how it goes, because the first question people say to you is, well, how much have you already raised? So when I was raising 300 and the first question I got was, well, how much have you raised? For 2 years, I was saying I only raised 18,000 from my first investor. Because and they're like, well, that's not a lot. That's not a lot. Even when I raised 100,000, they're like, Steph, that's not a lot of money. And then I got to 150. Steph, that's not a lot of money. And it just depends on who you're talking to. So it's
kind of a catch-22 though. Like, how are you? Everyone has to start somewhere, you know? Yeah. Like, the first time somebody gives you money, you're like, this is the first time somebody's giving me money. And they're like, well, you know, that's not a lot. And you're like, I know.
And just how hard it is. And then it's so funny because the people say that's not a lot of money. They're typically in this world of investing and private equity, and they do it for a living. So for them, they have their Rolodex of people. They just get on one phone call or send one email, be like, hey, I have this opportunity. I'm in for 20K. Are you guys in? Let me know. I'll connect you with Steph. And I saw how those conversations would play out. And I'm like, is it that easy? I'm like, this is why.
Right? It's surreal.
That's why people that come from this world of raising can have multiple, you go on TikTok and they're like, I run 83 businesses at once. It's because, sure, maybe they self-fund a lot of their own ventures, but you definitely need that initial startup capital. And when you're successful with one, you have your roster, you have your people. They don't even read it. From what I've heard and what I've been told is when you have your Rolodex of investors and you've already been successful once with your first venture, people will never ask to see a pitch deck. It's like, I believe in you. What are you doing now? What's your idea? Okay, cool. You did great with your first one. I'm in for this one too. So it's so easy for them. That's why people can raise like $1 million in a matter of weeks. So it's, I'm so much of me, like I can't get it out of my head when it was another female founder who said to me, if you ever spend more than 6 weeks raising money, you're going to kill your brand and kill your reputation. I'll never get that out of my head, but I look at what I've done and what this person has not done. And I'm proud.
Yeah.
Like whether it took me this long, it's completely on my own and there's no blueprint that tells you how to do it. And your initial question was like, what did my pitch sound like? I just told stories. Like I would tell a story about like my experience and what I'm doing and my idea. And people would say like, non-sophisticated investors love to say, well, what's your traction? Like, what's your traction? Because they know that's the question you're supposed to ask. But a sophisticated investor would know if you're just pre-concept, you don't have traction. You don't have sales.
Right.
You don't have anything. So they're not going to ask that. But when people would ask me that, I still wanted to answer. And my answer was always just people. Like, oh, I spoke to so-and-so. I spoke to the founder of so-and-so. This is the feedback they gave me. Or, we got an introduction to so-and-so. Like it was just storytelling with the people I was speaking with, the connections I had made, the people that were taking time with me. I had the COO and CFO of Decium, the Ordinary skincare company. They just had their exit to Estee Lauder. He spent hours with me. And it wasn't just because he was like a nice guy that had lots of free time. It's like, no, this man is insanely busy and has a family and a job. But he saw opportunity and he's like, I want to help you. So when I would just layer on those pieces to my storytelling because I'm like, look, if they're taking their time with me and they see value, there has to be something here. But then the follow-up to that is always, well, if they think it's so great, are they investing? And that's what you just have to navigate and deal with all the time. And I'm like, and I didn't know how to answer that. So if anyone here is listening and like they hear that when they're raising, when people would say like, well, if this person thinks it's so great, if everyone thinks this is so great, why aren't they investing? Why aren't they investing? My response to those people now is go on my wish list on Essence or on Sephora or on, my Pinterest board. There are so many things I'm obsessed with. And just because I'm obsessed with it doesn't mean I'm going to invest. And if I had a lot of money, I want to spend it on vacations and home renovations and like for my daughter. I don't have it I don't think about investing. Like it's just not in my wheelhouse. And that's how other people, not everyone, just because they have money, it doesn't mean that you're going to be an avid investor. So it does frustrate me because not enough people do talk about it when they're in the thick of it.
Everything that you said, this whole conversation has been really eye-opening and really, I think, something that hit a level of raising that I haven't heard yet. And it's been a really interesting and like unique perspective that has been so real. So I really appreciate you sharing your experience because it's been a really amazing learning opportunity for me and I'm sure for everybody listening too.
Totally. Well, I hope it does help someone else. Like it's all the things you see and listen to on Spotify. That is not the norm.
Yeah, I mean, and that's exactly why I started this podcast. It's exactly like you said, everyone who talks about this kind of stuff is 5-10 years into their journey and I don't know if it's because like they forget about this particular aspect or it's just not like a good high level story to tell. But I've always been more interested in this particular experience because that's really, I think, like the tactical advice that people need to get to where those people are.
Yeah. You learn so much along the way. I used to take, I still do. I still try to take every meeting, to always take a call when people are interested, always meet up with them, always bring a sample if you can, have coffee, etc. But there's times where I feel like I'm chasing people, and it's like not even a day before, 2 days before, things happen, things pop up, and then people cancel.
Mm-hmm.
And then they cancel again, and then they cancel the day of, and then 5 minutes before. And then you just get to a point where it's like, there's a time and place to chase people. Like, is this one of them? Because it is such a stressful situation. Also, when you're raising, this is another thing that no one talks about that killed me, like physically, health condition, like killed me during raising, is every time I would raise, there's like two different ways to do it. You can be financially responsible and not spend a penny until you've raised your full amount. Like, I need $300,000 to go to market. That was me. And I could have just done what I did for the first 2 years with no samples, no prototype, nothing, and waited to get that 300,000. But that wasn't possible because I knew I needed to continue to proof of concept. Yeah. I wanted people to try it. I wanted people to see it. I wanted to get subscribers. I wanted to build a website. Like, you need a website if you want to apply to government grants. So I needed to spend money as it came in. So every time checks came in, the bank account would go down to zero because I would spend it on something to help me progress. Now, there might be like 20 things on your list that you need to do, but you only have this much money. You have to know that if you're going to spend every penny in your bank account, is that going to move the needle? Is that the right decision? Yeah. And it's constant risk taking. And there's only 2 times where I made bad financial decisions where I was like, oh my God, I have no money. This is going belly up. I made a stupid call. Like, I should not have spent the money there. And then of course you lose sleep over it. But then there's the times when you make all the responsible decisions and the right ones, but you still have no money in the bank account. So it's like, how do you go back to your first people and say, well, I spent all your money and I can't even get to the next step? Or like, Steph, when are we getting samples? Like, when are you doing this? When are you getting this filed? When are you doing this? I'm like, I need more money. So going to bed at night, knowing that I had enough money to get my tools started, like tools and molds are like injection things that like squirt plastic and rubber like in the factories to make this. It's like a muffin tray. I wanted to get that started, but then I didn't have enough money to finish it. So I had half made muffin tins of like my product, in Asia, just sitting there because I needed to raise more money to finish it. And it's just like, I'm like, I've already spent so much to get this far. I can't just stop and give up. And it's just like, you get creative, you don't stop, and it always works out. And then once you do that 100 times, it's like every time you end up in a kerfuffle, you know that it's going to work out. The thing that I've changed now that I've gone to market is I don't spend a penny if I don't have to. Like, now it's about sales, not about spending. So if I'm going to spend on anything, it's, resourcing out my time or my inventory for the right reason. Mm-hmm. Like, if a retailer is remotely interested, they're going to get free product. When people on Instagram DM and they're like, I want to try, I'm like, well, this isn't like a try, use and send back thing. You're just asking for free product. Like, I have to be like, to me, that's being financially responsible. I am equity rich at this point. I have valuable assets, in our warehouse. And that to me is as good as gold, as good as cash. So I just try not to spend anything anywhere if I don't have to, until we're in a better position to invest in, ads and, paid marketing, paid social, paid paid press, paid all that sort of stuff. So
yeah.
It's
Well, that makes
scary.
sense. Yeah. Well, this has been amazing, Steph. Thank you so much for being here, giving me your time and your expertise. I really appreciate it, and I think that this is going to be really helpful for a lot of people.
Oh, I'm so glad. And you're so good at this. Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh, thank you.
Yeah, you're so good. This was awesome.